I'm getting everything going. Got to get it going. Everybody's whispering. Please, talk among yourselves until I tell you to stop. It's perfectly fine. No, you're fine. Elizabeth, do you have your iPad? We just hop on and check, make sure that's going good.
You gonna promote Rural King?
You gotta turn it around. Hashtag not sponsored. It's my new mug. I just got it today. I showed it to all the people that are live. It's diamond plate.
Please stop. Please tell me you're not live with that.
I am live. Rural King. Hashtag not sponsored. For all your farm and feed needs. All right, let's get started. Let's get going, kids. Kids, you got your papers.
We've been doing that.
You're gonna run out of stuff to do.
You almost didn't get it in the shop, but you got the mug was in the.
Was it in it? Perfect. I love it. Love it. Hashtag not sponsored. Love it. All right. I'm excited. Tonight's awesome. Tonight's our 4th meeting of the minds. I still got a couple people that I'm working on to get out here. So if you know anybody that would benefit from this, send them on. We like people who have open minds, who ask questions, who question the typical narrative and want to dig into the word. So, all right, we'll start it like we always do. I got a fun quote for you. Thought this was pretty interesting. The Bible is the best book in the world. It contains more than all the libraries I have seen. John Adams said that. So, fun little quote for you. So tonight we're going to go through Torah portion Vayera. We talked about this before, but the Torah is divided up into sections, and I figure why not stick with that. There's no point in trying to reinvent the wheel. So we're going through the portions just as they're divided out. Tonight we're going to be looking at Genesis 18 through 22. There's a lot going on in this portion. We're not going to get to everything because we don't have the time to dig through everything going on here. But we are going to look at quite a few things. I do want to start out though with talking about the portion. We always talk about the portion names and what they mean. And so what's interesting about this portion is Vayera means he appeared. And it comes from the word ra'ah, meaning appeared. And usually it's translated as appear, but in this verse, we're really going to see how this word Vayera really kind of comes to this idea of to see. So we're going to see him appear. He's going to see things, and it ties back into this word Vayera. Ties back into in creation when it said that Yah saw the dry land and it was good. How the dry land appeared. That's the same word. So it's just like this, not only just a physical sense, but also a revelatory sense as well. Sorry, excuse me, I gotta clean these glasses. So this word can mean discern, it can mean consider, appear, to show oneself, or to cause to see. It's a very, very rudimentary word, but it has a very large meaning. And a lot of times when you break the Hebrew words down into their very basic root, the meanings can get very, very broad. There's a lot that plays into the Hebrew language, which is really cool. And we're going to see Yah appear throughout this entire portion, which is it's pretty neat how many times we're going to see things. And we're going to talk about that a lot as we get into it. So let's recap what we talked about last week. Last week we saw the beginning of the life of Abraham. We saw Abram leave with family and followers. We saw Lot chose Sodom when he gave him the option. We saw Yah cut a covenant with Abraham. We talked about what all that means. We saw Hagar and Ishmael, and then we saw the promise of Isaac. So a lot happened last week, and a lot's going to happen this week. One of the things that I always tell people is, in Genesis, we're going to see the passage of a lot of time. And then Exodus through Deuteronomy is a very small window compared to Genesis. Genesis takes a lot of time. So we've covered a lot so far, and we're going to cover a lot tonight. So let's get into it. Genesis 18, that's where we're starting. Then Adonai, and we've seen this before, but this Adonai here is the Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yahweh, Yah. So this is the proper name of God, appeared to him at Mamre's large trees while he was sitting in the entrance of his tent during the heat of a day. Now, the way the grammar is structured in this is the prelude to what is happening. So he's kind of giving us an overview, and now the following part is telling us how he appears to Abraham. Okay, just so we understand that there's some grammatical things going on here that distinguish this first verse versus the rest of it. When he lifted up his eyes to see, suddenly 3 men were standing right by him. When he saw them, he ran from the entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed down to the ground. Then he said, "My Lord, if now I have favor in your eyes, please do not pass by your servant." Now this word here, my Lord, is Adonai. Same thing we just saw. But who has shown Abram favor in the past? Yah, right? So we're seeing a thing here. So it says 3 men, but then the first one when he says my Lord, which is translated Adonai, so here it's translated Adonai. Here Adonai is translated Yahweh. So there's a lot of, we've got to pay attention a lot to what the Hebrew says here to really grasp what's going on. Because this says my Lord is translated Adonai, but it's not the same Adonai as this. Okay? So there's 2 different things taking place, but we're going to see.
What is it?
This is actually, the Hebrew here is Adonai.
Okay.
The Hebrew here is Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
So if we really have to pay attention to these different words. There's a lot of things highlighted in this first chapter especially. So here, my Lord, the Hebrew word is Adonai. But who has shown Abraham favor? Adonai, Yahweh, right? Yah. So we know what he's talking about here. Abraham recognizes who this is and immediately jumps up and rushes to serve them. So in that culture, in that day, there is this understanding of honor and shame. And in an honor and shame culture, a lot of times, if somebody shows up to your house, you're going to take care of them. Abraham's going above and beyond, right? It's not that suddenly, when he saw them, he ran. So this is going above and beyond just what a normal honor and shame culture would do. You think about, not so much now, but think about like when we were younger kids. Somebody showed up at the house, who's here? Put the coffee on. We didn't run out necessarily. The kids might run out, but we were like, oh, let's go see what it is. Here, Abraham is going above and beyond that because he recognizes who this is. Please let a little water be brought so you can wash your feet and make yourselves comfortable under the tree. And let them bring a bit of bread so that you can refresh yourselves. Then you can pass on, since you have passed by your servant. They said, do just as you have said. Now what's interesting is, if you look at this translation, the way it's translated in Hebrew, it would be better translated, and some say this, some of the different translations say this, please do not pass me by. Instead of, then you can pass on since you have passed by, it would be better to say, please don't pass me by. Because he recognizes who this is. And he's like, hey, come stay. I know who you are. I'm recognizing you. Don't just pass your servant by. And I'm like, who talks like this to strangers? It's a very, for it not to be someone that he recognizes, the language is very familiar. Like he knows who it is. So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah and said, quick, knead 3 measures of fine flour and prepare bread loaves. Then to the herd, Abraham ran and took a young ox, tender and good, and he gave it to the servant who prepared it quickly. And I just thought it was very interesting. He didn't tell them why. He wasn't like, hey, these guys are out here. I know who this one is. I know who these guys are. We need to take care. He just said, hey, do it. And they responded. Then he took butter and milk and the young ox that he had prepared and set it before them. While he was standing by them under the tree, they ate. Then they said to him, where is Sarah your wife? There in the tent, he said. Then he said, I will most surely return to you in about a year's time. surprisingly, Sarah, your wife, will have a son. Sarah was listening at the entrance of the tent, which was behind him. So, see, now they're prophesying. So who are these men? Like, these aren't just ordinary men. Now they're saying, and they're not saying, oh yeah, your wife's going to have a child. They're saying, in a year's time, we're going to come back to you, and she's going to have a child. So it's very, very specific. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. Sarah had stopped having the way of women. She was no longer biologically able to have children. Okay? This isn't just say, oh, I'm just old, I'm too old to have children. No, she had stopped having the way of women. She was no longer capable. Her body was not producing the things needed to have a child. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, after I've grown decrepit, can I have desire, and my Lord so old? So this is to herself. These are almost her inner thoughts. Then Adonai, I'm putting these in parentheses so we can see these, okay? This is translated Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, said to Abraham, why is it that Sarah laughed, saying, can I really give birth when I am so old? So there's 3 men there, but this is getting translated as Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Just pointing it out. We're going to continue on.
So that, there's that saying that basically God is there in human form.
Yes. And we're going to see that. We're going to see that. We're going to talk about that as we can continue on. Yeah. Is anything too difficult for Adonai? Again, this is translated Yahweh. At the appointed time, I will return to you in about a year, and Sarah will have a son. This appointed time, where it says appointed time, is actually the Hebrew moed, where we get moedim. This is connected to feast days. So when we get into the rest of the Torah, when we get into Leviticus, and it talks about Yah's appointed times, this is the same words, this is the same verbiage that they use to talk about those times. So, who said they would return in a year's time in verse 10? Right? We saw there was the man. Now we're seeing Adonai speaking. We're going to keep connecting these dots. Sarah denied it, saying, I didn't laugh, for she was afraid. But he said, no, for you did laugh. Who said? He said. Who's he? We're going to keep talking. We're going to look at it. So she had inner thoughts. She was to herself when she laughed. Now we see one of the 3 visitors saying, no, you did laugh. When you were in the tent, I heard you. I heard you. Then the man got up from there and looked down over Sodom. Abraham was walking with them to send them off. When Adonai, translated Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh again, said, should I keep secret from Abraham what I'm about to do, seeing that Abraham will most certainly become a great and mighty nation, and in him all the nations of the earth will be blessed. Which brought to mind this, Amos 3:7. We've talked about this before. For the Lord Adonai will do nothing unless he revealed it to his counsel to his servants, the prophets. We talked about that in the intro class when we were leading into the Torah, right? So he's saying, should I keep it a secret? He can't keep it a secret. If he's going to do it, he's got to reveal it. And in the next, I think it's the next chapter, we're going to see that Abraham was called a prophet of God. So Yah will not operate outside of his own standards. Right? He set the standard in place. We were just read it in Amos. That's the standard. So he's not going to operate outside of that. So why would he take the time to tell Abraham?
Wasn't Abraham also a type of prophet?
Yeah, so Abraham's a type of prophet. He has to reveal it to him. Let's keep looking though, because there's more to it as to why he was telling him. For I have known him so that he commands his children and his household after him to guard the way of Yahweh, to do righteousness and right ruling, so that Yahweh brings to Abraham what he has spoken to him. So it's one thing for us to know God. We've got his word, we have prayer. It's one thing for us to know God. It's another thing for God to know us. So this is showing that not only did Abraham follow his rulings and know God, now God knows him. We talked about last week how there's the tradition of that Abraham was most likely gathering disciples before he left Ur and the land of his family, and that he was teaching them all of the right rulings of God. So now it's gone beyond just now Abraham knows God to now God is saying, I know him, or he knows me as well. But this is what it made me think of this when it says that he commands his children and his household. Deuteronomy 6:6-7. These words which I am commanding you today are to be on your heart, which we know Abraham, it was on his heart. You are to teach them diligently to your children and speak of them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way, when you lie down and when you rise up. Oh, this is part of the Shema. This is known as the Shema in Deuteronomy chapter 6. And it goes on. And this is what's crazy. This is what, when Yeshua said, what is the greatest commandment? He quoted the Shema. He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. That's directly from the Shema. That's Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. So this is crazy that prior to it even being there, we're already seeing it in Genesis. So Abraham is upholding the covenant before the covenant has fully taken shape. So Deuteronomy chapter 6, that's right before the children of Israel are getting ready to go into the promised land. And Moses is going over all the things that God's told him. And so right there, that's the seal, one of the seals of the covenant is that Shema. And Abraham is already following through with what is going to come now. It's another, oh, that's my notes. It's another sign that the Torah is eternal. That it has been from the beginning and it continues on. Even though we don't see it written down by God until Exodus, that it had been known. We saw that with Cain and Abel. We saw that with Noah. We're seeing it now with Abraham. That there is signs that the Torah has always been and always will be. Then Adonai said, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great indeed, and their sin is very grievous indeed. I want to go down now and see if they deserve destruction, as its outcry has come to me, and if not, I will know. Then the men turned from there and went toward Sodom, but Abraham was still standing before Adonai. Now, this word standing here, 90% of the time, this word standing means physically standing. It can have some ambiguous meanings and some more hypothetical things, but 90% of the time, this is actually saying he was standing before Yah. Just connecting dots. Abraham drew near and said, will you really sweep away the righteous with the wicked? So Abraham is backing up and saying, hey, there's got to be somebody righteous in there. You think, are you going to sweep away all these righteous people with the wicked? Like, come on. You can't destroy all these righteous people. Suppose there are 50 righteous people within the city. Will you really sweep it away and not spare it for the sake of 50? Far be it from me, far be it from you to do such a thing, to cause the righteous to die with the wicked, so that the righteous and the wicked share the same fate. Far be it from you, shall the judge of the whole world not exercise justice. So he's saying, hey, far be it from me, and far be it from you. He's like, let's get this figured out. We know they need to have justice. We know, but then we know there's righteous. Like how can he's basically begging God for mercy. Like how can we find mercy for this city? Then Adonai said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous people within the city, I will spare the whole place for their sake. Then Abraham answered and said, look, pray, I have decided to speak to my Lord, though I am dust and ashes. He's lower. He's like, can I say one more thing? Suppose the 50 righteous people are lacking 5. Will you destroy the whole city for that lack? And he said, I will not destroy it for 45 there. So he spoke to him yet again. Maybe, what about 40? He says, what about 40? And Yah said, okay, for 40 I won't do it. And what I imagine here, this is just Daniel reading in between the lines. What I imagine here is he said 50, and then God didn't change, and he was like, "What? Why aren't you stopping? Why? Well, okay, hold on. What about 45?" And then there's a little bit of time passes and nothing's changing. He's like, "Oh, okay. What about 40?" And he says, "Okay, I won't do it for 40." Then he said, "Please let my Lord not be angry, so I may speak. Perhaps 30. Now I can just imagine your kid just be like, hey, what about? Can I have $5? Well, what about $10? Can I get $10? Like, I'm sure y'all's like, what? Okay, I won't do it. Okay, 30. I'll stop for 30. Oh, so it's like eventually you feel like y'all's gonna step in and be like, okay, that's enough. Why? It's like, why is Yah allowing Abraham to just continue this plead? Well, let's keep reading. I think we're gonna come to a conclusion on this. Then he said, look, pray, I've decided to speak to my Lord, perhaps 20. And he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 20. Then he said, well, what? Okay, perhaps once more. What about 10? Perhaps 10 will be found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 10. Now, when he had finished speaking to Abraham, Adonai left, and Abraham returned to his place. Right? So, so why did Abraham stop at 10? Why did Abraham stop at 10? So, if I believe that what's happening here, Abraham knows that Lot and his wife, his two daughters, their future husbands, their sons-in-law, his sons-in-laws are there. And if they had any influence in the city, there would be at least 10. There would be at least 10. And I think this entire test of what Abraham is going through with Yah is Abraham starting out at a big number. He's like, goodness gracious, Lot grew up in my family. He grew up in my household under my guidance. Surely he had influence on enough people. And if it went from Lot's handful of family to 50 people, then there's hope that there's growth in the city and the city's going to change. Then it gets down to 45. And so the last ditch effort is if there's 10 and Lot has increased from 6 to 10, at least he's had influence on somebody. I think Abraham was like, surely my nephew could have got 4 people to follow after God, to follow righteousness. And I think also I also think there's part there that Yah was seeing where Abraham's heart was. Because Abraham, the promise is with Abraham. The promise isn't with Lot. The promise isn't with Sodom. So Yah could have come down and be like, hey, I'm going to destroy that city. And Abraham be like, have you seen that city? Go for it. But he's not. Even in that, he's asking God for mercy just for a handful of people. And then 19:1 starts out, now the 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening while Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom. Which is interesting because they started with 3. And it said they went to Sodom, but Yah stayed back with Abraham.
It's interesting how it goes from 2 men to specify. Oh, those were 2 angels.
Yeah. Yep. So we started out with 3. These 2 guys show up in Sodom. Yah stays with Abram. We're seeing a pattern here. So with that, let's see, hold on. Okay, there we go. So men went to Sodom while Yah stayed and talked with Abraham. Now we see just 2 men entering Sodom, which here we see it actually says angels. So here's yet another example of who is it? Who is it? Right? So I'm going to give you before we go on, I'm going to give you my conclusion on this. So we see in John 1, it says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God, right? And then we have the physical example in the Gospels of Yeshua coming as the person of God in the flesh form, showing up as a man. And the way I put it to groups in the past is that Yah created the earth. Yah created time. Yah created the expanse. And then there's things happening in the earth that he needs to be here for. So how does he get himself into the earth? So the way I put it is I created this cup of coffee for the sake of my example. I created this cup of coffee, right? I'm bigger than this cup of coffee. If something's going on and I need to get into this cup of coffee, I'm not going to be able to get in this cup of coffee. But what can I do? I can put my finger into it and stir it, right? So we see throughout the creation story and what we've reached so far that anytime we see the idea of the Spirit, it's the Hebrew word ruach, and ruach is breath. It's the breath of God, right? I believe that anytime we see Yah, trying to see if we had it on this page. Anytime we see the Yod He Vav He manifesting himself in the earth, it is through the person of Yeshua throughout Scripture. It may look different than what we see in the Gospels, but anytime we see the manifestation of God in the flesh, that we can assume that it's Yeshua. And it's so interesting, if you study out the Hebrew words for Yehoshua, which is the extended form of Yeshua, and Yod He Vav He, the proper name of God, Yahweh that we call it, they connect. So you have you have Yehoshua, that means Yah is salvation. And the letters are right there. So it's like Yah's taking a part of himself and putting it into Yeshua. So anytime we see, and we're going to see that as we continue to study through the rest of the Torah, we're going to see so many times where we get to these points of who is it? Who is it? We're even going to see, I think it's in this portion, we're going to see where it says an angel, and then it says messenger, and then it's like God speaking again. So there's a lot of these things, but always remember, we don't always have to understand it. Yah is smarter than we are. And one day we'll get the full understanding and the full breadth of what a lot of this means. Any questions on chapter 18? Jacob, the way we normally do this around here too is we stop at the end of each chapter. Just let anybody ask any questions they have. Instead of, it makes it easier than answering questions throughout the chapter. So, we got to go through 22. It's going to be awesome.
I'd like to know what John Abraham talks about.
Oh, yeah, there's so many.
I want to know what their conversations were after.
Yeah, oh yeah. That's just like when you see like, in the beginning in Genesis, when it talks about they walked and talked with God in the garden. Yeah, it's like, oh my gosh. What were those conversations like? Yeah.
Is it safe to say that Lot was the only righteous one there, right? Because his wife turned into salt, and then his daughter did some questionable things.
I think at this point, it would be safe to say that Lot was righteous, and his wife and daughters, even though they're never called righteous, I think at this point, being under his roof and being taught from him, that you could say that they were probably righteous by association, and that we'll see their downfall and their decline of righteousness after they leave, if that makes sense. It's kind of like, so in that culture, when you lived under your father's roof, you were kind of protected by his roof. So like my children are protected by my name. As soon as they leave my house, and that's how that culture worked too. As soon as they left from home, from their father's house, to be married, they were no longer under his guidance, his protection, his counsel. So it's kind of like, were they righteous? I don't know. I don't know personally, but they were under his roof. And so a lot of times the father had a very good control over what happened under his roof. That makes sense? So then we're going to see that decline as we continue on. But yes, in a technical sense, he potentially was the only one righteous person in the town. Yeah, yeah. All right, continuing on. Genesis chapter 19. Now the two angels came to Sodom in the evening, while Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he got up to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. So sitting at the gate, that means this person was a judge of the city. We're going to see this a lot as we're studying through the Torah. Even when you're reading the rest of the Tanakh in the Old Testament, you'll see a lot of times where it talks about at the gate. At the gate was where they judged within the city. So Lot went from camping near the city, we saw this last week, to then being in the city, to now he's a judge in the city. So he's just escalating deeper and deeper into the throngs of the city. And we see just like Abraham, Lot recognized these guys as someone special. You don't typically just go bow to the ground in front of someone who you don't know is something special. Then he said, "Here, please, my lords, please turn aside to your servant's house, spend the night and wash your feet. Then you can get up early and go on your way." But they said, "No, we will spend the night in the open plaza." But he urged them strongly, so they turned aside to him, and they came into his house. He prepared a feast for them and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. So feast. This feast, this is a celebration, a festival. The actual Hebrew word means to drink. So they were having a good time. So again, these aren't just some ordinary men. Interestingly, if you study this out, figuratively, this word feast is shatha, and it also can mean of drinking cup of God's wrath. So it's almost also a foreshadow of what's getting ready to happen. So remember, Yah operates cyclically, right? So they've already been told by the men that they will return the same time next year. So we're seeing this cycle, right? They baked the messengers unleavened bread. The second Moed, or the feast of Yah, is the feast of unleavened bread. So we're seeing some connections, we're seeing some patterns to feast days. Now, I will say this, there's also ancient writings that suggest that Isaac was born in the 3rd month, which is when Shavuot happens. So there's two different things here going on that point towards this is potentially an actual feast. And that connects to what we talked about earlier, where that word appointed time actually means Moed.
Interesting that they specify unleavened bread, because unleavened bread was not specified when Abraham had Sarah make bread.
Correct. So there's
Passage of time, possibly?
one, there could be a passage of time. Two, also, he made it in haste, so he didn't have time.
So, okay, so the point being it was a fast, it was a quick bread.
Correct, correct.
It wasn't hollow.
And that's why I also point out that there's also ancient writings that talk about it being the 3rd month, which is when Shavuot takes place. Either way, it's connected to some feast times. They had not yet lain down when the men of the city, the men of Sodom, surrounded the house from youth to elderly, all of the people without exception. Wickedness has no boundaries in this city.
Are we going to
Yes.
read this differently?
Yeah, I got you. And they called out to Lot and said to him, "Where are the men who came with you tonight? Bring them out so we can be with them." But Lot went out to them at the doorway and shut the door behind them and said, "Please, my brothers, don't act wickedly. Look, I have 2 daughters who haven't been intimate with a man. Please let me bring them out to you. Do to them whatever is good in your eyes. However, do nothing to those men, since they have come under the protection of my roof." Again, we just mentioned this. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it. Look, this chapter is going to get so awesome.
What do you mean by that?
Okay? "Get out of the way," they said. And they said, "This one came as an outsider." They're talking about Lot. "And now dares to judge. Now we'll treat you worse than them." So they strongly pressed against the man, Lot, and moved in close to break down the door. So this shows that Lot originally came as a sojourner. Remember we talked about, we're going to see this word sojourner a lot throughout the Torah. but has assimilated into their culture, right? He came in as an outsider. This word outsider is sojourner. And now he's judging. So he's moved up the ranks, right? He's assimilated into their culture. But the men reached out their hands, brought Lot into the house with them, and shut the door. Then they struck the men at the doorway of the house with blindness, from youth to elderly, so that they gave up trying to find the doorway. That's pretty bad.
Men being the angels.
Yes.
Okay.
See, who is it? Is it angels? Is it men?
Who is it?
Then the men said to Lot, who else? Now, this is talking about the angels. Who else related to you is still here? A son-in-law, your sons and your daughters, whoever else is related to you in the city, bring them out of the place. For we are about to destroy this place because their outcry has become so great before Adonai that Adonai has sent us to destroy it. So this word outcry is zak, and it's a cry out in distress. But what's interesting is in Arabic, this word translates as sound as thunder, thunderbolt. So this is something echoing that's hitting heaven. He's like, this has gotten so bad that it sounds like thunder to God in heaven. Now, this same word we see also in Genesis 4:10. Then he said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground. Same word.
Wow.
So it is this idea of such wickedness that it gets so loud in the earth that it's thundering into heaven. So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law who were going to marry his daughter. So it's interesting they call them son-in-laws, but they're actually just betrothed. They haven't actually been married. And this is very important here in just a second. Get up, he said, get out of this place, for Adonai is about to destroy the city. But in the eyes of his sons-in-law, he was like a joker. When the righteous speak, the wicked scoff. And this made me think of Noah. Noah was like, it's going to rain. And they laughed at him, right? So when the righteous speak, the wicked scoff. So when morning dawned, the angels rushed Lot, saying, get up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, or else you will be swept away with the city's iniquity. But he hesitated. Everything that's going on, all these things that their angels are telling him is about to happen, but he is still so connected to Sodom that he's like, oh, but it's so good here. It's so convenient here. I'm a judge in the city. I got power. He probably had wealth from that. So the men grabbed his hand, his wife's hand, and his 2 daughters' hands because of Adonai's compassion for him. Kind of what we talked about, kind of getting back to the who was righteous. Well, because of Lot, the wife's hand and the daughter's hands were grabbed as well. But whose hands did they not grab? The son-in-laws. Why?
Because they laughed at him.
Yep. There's another reason. Why did he grab the wife and the daughters?
They were his wife and daughters?
Correct. They were under what? Under his roof, under his protection. Because of Lot, they grabbed them, right? These boys don't have no connection to Lot. They're not under his roof. They're not married yet.
So realistically, if the girls were already married, they probably wouldn't be left.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Yep. Because they would have no longer been under Lot's roof. Which I think kind of goes back to who was righteous. Had they been married, they might have got left back, kind of showing that they weren't part of that righteous bunch.
Well, I'm curious too if the whole rescuing of Lot wasn't really honestly just for Abraham.
Yes and no. We'll see that in just a second.
Okay.
When they brought them outside, one said, flee for your life. Do not look behind you. There's the command. Do not look behind you, and do not stop anywhere in the surrounding area. Escape to the hills, or else you will be swept away. But Lot said to them, no, my lord, please. Look, please, your servant has found favor in your eyes, and you have magnified your merciful loyalty, which you have shown me by letting me live, but I can't escape to the hill country, for the disaster will overtake me and I'll die. So now he's not paying attention to anything they said. He's worried about something that they didn't even say was going to happen. Like, don't you think if they said go to the hill, then the hill's going to be the safe place? Which, this is, I thought was interesting. Who's in the mountain? Abraham's in the mountain.
So why doesn't he want to go there?
I don't know. I think, this is just me, he's sending him back to Abraham. But why would he be sending him back to Abraham? I think because Abraham was a teacher of Yah's Torah. We talked about that last week. So he's sending him back. Yeah, they separated, and Lot's gotten himself in a mess of trouble. And I think he's sending him back, trying to send him back to Abraham and say, hey, get back connected with the one that was keeping you. Look, please, this city is close enough to flee there, and it's little. Please let me escape there. Isn't it small? And let me live. So he said to him, behold, I will grant your request concerning this matter too, not to demolish the city of which you have spoken. So obviously this city that he's getting ready to go to was originally supposed to be part of the destruction.
Wow.
Hurry, flee to safety there, because I cannot do anything until you arrive there. This is why the town is named Zoar. And Zoar was in last week's portion. We talked about Zoar last week. It was one of the cities that was founded by the kings that joined with Nimrod and all the other guys that were fighting against the king of Sodom and the king of some of those. So we saw, it's interesting, that city's right there, and he's like, hey, that one's a little one, let me go there, and please don't destroy it, let me live. The moment the sun rose upon the land, Lot entered Zoar. And Adonai rained sulfur and fire upon Sodom and Gomorrah from Adonai out of the sky. So he demolished these cities and the whole surrounding area, all the inhabitants of the cities and the vegetation of the ground. It's all. But his wife looked behind him, and she turned into a pillar of salt.
So are they still running at the time?
They're leaving. Yep, they're leaving. They're trying to get out of there. She turns around. And interestingly enough, and I meant to get the picture on my thing, but there is actually still standing next to the Dead Sea where they believe all this happened, which is why it's dead, because there's so much sulfur and salt and mineral there. There is a pillar that has the form of a person, and they believe that is still Lot's wife standing to this day. So, this is a crazy story. But let's talk about Lot for a minute. Because Lot, this story takes an interesting turn once we read into 2 Peter. Let's read 2 Peter. 2 Peter 2:6. He devastated the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, reducing them to ashes, making them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly. He rescued Lot, a righteous man, deeply troubled by the shameless immorality of the wicked. For that righteous man, while living among them, was tormented in his righteous soul day after day by lawless deeds he saw and heard. So according to Peter, Lot was righteous. Now, we just talked about this word righteous. The word righteous in the Hebrew is zadik. And we talked about how it links back to obedient to the commands. How can he say that in light of the verses that we just read in Genesis?
That's got to go back to the other books.
Well, there's some stuff we can look at too. So let's go back to Genesis 19. And let's recap some of this, all right? And they called out to Lot and said, bring out the men. Where are they tonight? Bring them out. But Lot went out to them at the doorway and shut the door behind him. Okay? So Lot's going out, closing the door. He's putting himself in between them. And said, please, my brothers, don't act wickedly. So he is calling out. Remember what his position is. He's a judge. He's calling out what they're talking about doing as wicked. I don't think that that's going to make them happy. Right? People don't like when you call them out and tell them what they're doing is wicked, especially when it's something that is culturally acceptable. This is the culture of Sodom. And if you actually read in some of the other ancient texts, it talks about that they were purposefully mean to new people that came in, that they were purposefully doing stuff like this. So this is not something that's like a one-off thing. This is the culture of the day. So he's calling out the culture as being wicked. Look, I have 2 daughters who haven't been intimate with any man. Please let me bring them out to you to do to them whatever is good in your eyes. However, do nothing to these men. Now we first read this, and it's like, what is he doing? Like, why would you do that? Like, I don't care who you're trying to protect, your own daughters. But, let's keep reading. Get out of the way, they said, and they said, this one came as an outsider and dares to judge. Now we'll treat you worse than them. So they strongly pressed against the man Lot and moved in close to break the door down. So what was Lot's role in the city? We just talked about this. He was a judge. Who were the men of the city seeking?
The angels.
The male visitors. Who did Lot offer them instead? His female daughters. So Lot judged them as evil and offered them an alternative to see how evil their hearts were, and then ultimately put himself in harm's way. He never actually did give his daughters up. We read that and we're like, oh my gosh. I believe he was being a strategic judge, and he was like, hey, how about this instead? To see how they would react. And then he ultimately still put himself in harm's way. Everybody else is shut up in the house. He shut the door. They're not going in there. His daughters are safe. The men are safe. Everybody else is safe. He's the one that has put himself in harm's way. So I think when we look at that, it kind of gives us a kind of more of a big picture of what was happening there and how in the world Peter could say Lot was righteous after we're reading stories of him offering his daughters up. But it never happened.
It just feels like Lot always likes to walk dangerously close.
I agree. I agree. Yep.
Shady.
So now, let's also talk about the sins of Sodom, because this is interesting as well. So Ezekiel chapter 16. Now, this chapter in Ezekiel is calling out Jerusalem later on for their abominations. You have not only walked in their ways and gone after their abominations, but in a very short time you have acted more corruptly than them in all your ways. As I live, it is a declaration of Adonai, your sister Sodom with her daughters have not done as you have done, you and your daughters. Behold, this was the iniquity of your sister Sodom. Pride, gluttony, and careless ease. So she had her daughters, and she did not strengthen the hand of the poor and the needy. So they were haughty and committed abominations before me. Therefore I removed them when I saw it. So we see pride. We see gluttony. Careless ease. They were like, we're good. We don't need to worry about anything. We're good. They got real comfortable with what they were doing. And she did not strengthen the hand of the poor and the needy. So they were very, very selfish. They weren't helping out the poor and the needy in their town. And I think so in the next verse it says, haughty and committed abominations. I think the abominations were a result of the evil that had started in their heart because of these basic things. They started out with pride, gluttony, and careless ease. Well, what happened when that happened? It just kept building. And that turned into their haughtiness. Oh, we're better than everybody. Now look, we're Sodom. We're awesome. And committed abominations. These abominations were taking place because of the things that they had to build in their heart over time. For thus says Adonai Elohim, I will do to you just as you have done, since you despise the oath by breaking the covenant. Nevertheless, I will remember my covenant with you in the days of your youth. Moreover, I will establish an everlasting covenant with you. So I will establish my covenant with you, and you will know that I am Adonai. This verse, I just had to put the rest of this in there because I was like, oof. So you will remember, be ashamed, and never open your mouth again because of your disgrace. when I have forgiven you of all that you have done. So Yah's like, I'm going to forgive you, but you're going to remember it. You're going to remember the shame that you felt. And I'm hoping it keeps you from doing it again. So we looked at Lot. We looked at the sins of Sodom. Now let's look at the cycle of Sodom. Remember, God's cyclical. He operates in cycles. Well, if he operates in cycles, guess what else operates in cycles? Wickedness. Luke 17. It was just the same in the days of Lot. They were eating, drinking, buying, selling, planting, building. But on the day Lot left Sodom, it rained fire and sulfur from heaven and destroyed them all. Things will be the same on the day when the Son of Man is made fully known. In that day, the one who is on the roof and his possessions in the house must not go down to take them away. In the same way, the one who is in the field must not turn back. Remember Lot's wife. So I believe this is a warning for us that as we're getting closer to, as this says, the Son of God being fully made known, that we have to make sure that we don't go, oh, I know, but that was so good. I remember those days. I remember when we used to do that. Do we have, okay, I know I got to keep going this, but it's back, it's just right there. It's just right there. Remember Lot's wife. What happened when she turned back? Don't look back. Whoever tries to keep his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life will preserve it. And I've heard that verse so many times, but never in the context of the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. All right, let's get back to the portion. 27, now Abraham rose early in the morning to the place where he stood, where? Before Adonai, right? So he was standing before Yah. And he looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward the entire land of the surrounding area and saw, behold, the smoke of the land ascended like smoke from a furnace. So it was, as God destroyed the cities of the surrounding area, that God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the upheaval, when he demolished the cities where Lot had dwelled. So when Lot went up from Zoar and dwelled on the mountain with his 2 daughters with him, because he was afraid to dwell in Zoar, so he lived in a cave, he and his 2 daughters. So he ends up kind of going in the direction Yah told him to go in the first place. Except for now he's not with Abraham, he's stuck in a cave. So verse 31 through 36, you can read this on your own, but this tells the story of Lot's daughters and their abomination. In order to maintain a PG rating for our video, we're gonna skip over that. Then the firstborn gave birth to a son and named him Moab. He is the ancestor of the Moabites to this day. The younger also gave birth to a son and named him Ben-Ami. He is the ancestor of the sons of Ammon to this day. So out of their sin, we get the Moabites and the Ammonites. The Moabites and Ammonites are, they're a good thorn in the side of the Israelites. But what's interesting, hold on, I forgot to bring my Bible in here with me. Let me get my Bible. Hold on. I was actually reading this today, and I didn't have time to put it into the slide, so I wanted to bring it out. If you have your Bible, turn to Daniel chapter 11. Let's see. Daniel chapter 11. And I did not count on the fact that there's not much light over here. Let me turn my light on my phone so I can see real quick. All right, Daniel chapter 11. And we're going to start. So, interesting thing about Daniel chapter 11. Daniel chapter 11 is actually one of the chapters in the prophets that they say probably has the most detail of any prophecy. It is probably the most detailed prophecy in Scripture. But if we skip down, this whole thing is about the kings of the south and the king of the north, and it alludes to the Antichrist and the coming of the Antichrist and end time stuff. But if you start in verse 40, at the time of the end, the king of the south will engage him in battle, but the king of the north will storm against him with chariots, horsemen, and many ships. He will invade countries and sweep through them like a flood. He will also invade the beauty land, and many will fall. But these will escape from his power: Edom, Moab, and the prominent people of the Ammonites. So as much as they are a pain in Israel's side, and they're one of the ites, we see there that they're going to be some of the groups that get to escape from the power of that king of the north. Just thought that was kind of interesting. You don't see the ites mentioned too many times past, escaping judgment and past Torah. Anyways, any question on chapter 19? I'm not. All right. All right, Genesis chapter 20. Moving along nicely. All right. Elizabeth, you want to read?
Sure. Then Abraham journeyed from there to the land of Negev and settled between Kadesh and Shur, while he was dwelling with an outsider in Gerar. Is that how you would say it?
Sure.
Abraham said to Sarah his wife, "She is my sister." So King Abimelech of Gerar sent for and took Sarah.
So this word "took" means he acquired her as a wife. Just so we're all on the same page.
But God came to Abimelech in a dream at night and said to him, "Behold, you are good as dead because of the woman whom you have taken, since she is a married woman."
So Abimelech is the king of Gerar. We see that. Now Gerar is a Philistine city. This area will be later. At this point in time, it's not called Philistia, but we're going to see in a minute they start referring to this as a Philistine city. But if you do some studying on Abimelech was actually polytheistic. So just because you're getting dreams and visions from Yah doesn't make you righteous. Just want to point that out there. He is not necessarily a God-fearing man, obedient to the commands, but God's showing up to him and saying, "Hey, what you're about to do, you're going to wind up getting in trouble for that, buddy. Let's hold up." Now Abimelech had not come near her, so he said, "My lord, will you slay a nation even though innocent?" He's like, "Hey, I didn't do nothing. I didn't know. You're going to slay us just because of that? Didn't he say to me, 'She's my sister?' And she herself even said, 'He's my brother.' I did this with integrity of my heart and guiltlessness of my hands." Then God said to him in a dream, "Yes, I myself knew that you did this with integrity of your heart. So I, yes, myself, prevented you from sinning against me. This is why I did not allow you to touch her. So now return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and let him pray for you, and you will live. But if you do not return her, know that you will surely die, you and all who are yours." So Abimelech was a polytheistic Philistine king. Yah spoke to him in a dream. Yah said, "Yeah, I knew you had integrity." And it says, I think it's interesting, it says that Yah kept him from sinning. So Yah stepped in to prevent it. And this is all for what we know is an unrighteous man. We don't have any record of him being a follower of commands.
Why did Sarah speak up or something?
Because Abraham told her, "Hey," the whole premise behind this, because this is the second time this has happened now, is that if a king saw your wife and was like, "I want her," he would kill you so that you weren't married anymore so he could have you.
Wouldn't God protect them?
Yes, he would. They're not thinking that way. As much as God has done for them, and they're still not thinking, "Oh, we'll be okay. He's taking care of us. Why would he stop now?" And this whole kind of scenario made me think of the idea in Scripture where it talks about that rain falls on the just and the unjust. Like, God is watching out for what's going to happen. He has a plan in mind, and He's going to use the just and the unjust to make sure His plan happens.
We just talked about that woman in her 80s at this point was beautiful enough to be taken by two kings. Like, wow.
Yeah. Exactly. Abimelech rose early in the morning, called all his servants, and spoke all these words in their ears. And the men were very frightened. So I was like, even his servants, after hearing this, were like, ooh, you almost messed up. That was almost big. Then Abimelech called to Abraham and said to him, what have you done to us? And how have I sinned against you, that you brought great sin upon me and my kingdom? You've done to me things that should not be done. Abimelech also said to Abraham, what motivated you to do this? And we've already seen this. This is in light of the fact that he's a prophet. So Abimelech's like, dude, you're supposed to be a prophet. Why are you acting like this? This is a bad rap for your God. You're supposed to be a prophet, and you're treating me like this, and this is happening? A prophet's main function, we see this all throughout Scripture, was to call people back out of sin, and he's leading them into sin. His goal, his purpose should be dropping. We've seen this. He taught Torah. His goal is to bring people away from sin, and now he's pushing Abimelech into sin. Abraham said, because I thought, stop thinking, Abraham. This is certainly no fear. There's certainly no fear of God in this place, so they'll kill me because of my wife. Again, Emma, back to what you said. He had no thought that Yah would take care of him. He immediately thought, there's so much wickedness in this place that they're going to kill me. They're going to kill me. And besides, she really is my sister. Now he's making excuses, which she's my father's daughter, though not my mother's daughter. Then she became my wife. So, okay, so back up. Technically, they are related. Sarah was actually Lot's sister. I have to look at the genealogy. So this word where it says, she is my father's daughter, in the Hebrew, this can mean generationally. So it could actually be, she is a descendant of your grandfather.
So
But the
Cousin.
yeah, so there's actually, so the way that the wording works is that she is my father's daughter. That word father doesn't necessarily mean direct father. It can mean any male in your lineage. So it could be your grandfather. And it can be any, so the way it works, it's not necessarily.
it's still weird.
Yes,
I get what you're trying
correct.
to say.
Does that make sense? You see what I'm saying? So when God made me wander away from my father's house, I said to her, this is your loyalty that you must show me. In every place we go, say of me, he is my brother. So, was she lying? No. Was she being deceptive? Yes. Abraham, though, was worried for his life. That's why he said it. Does that make it right? No. He should have had the faith that Yah would protect them no matter what they did. He's done it so far. And you should have learned the first time you tried this and it didn't work. It's not like this is the first, it's the second time he's tried this. And we're going to see later on that Isaac does it too. So it's it's a generational thing. They just keep doing it. Then Abimelech took sheep, cattle, male slaves, and female slaves and gave them to Abraham and returned his wife Sarah to him. So this is interesting, but it made me think of this. In Exodus and in Deuteronomy, there are commands laid out about returning objects. And in those commands, it sets forth a principle that says that you should return things better than the way you found them. So Abimelech is like, okay, I'm giving her back. And also, here's this. Please, just take it. Don't do this again. Stop this. Then Abimelech said, look, my land is before you. Dwell wherever you please. At the same time, he said to Sarah, look, I've given 1,000 shekels to your brother. look, it is compensation for everything that happened. So everyone with you, you are vindicated. Now this is very important. We're going to see this as we study in the Torah. He right now is paying for his mistake so that no one can take revenge on him. So we're going to see this when we start getting into Exodus, Leviticus, the rest of the Torah, how there was vengeance that would take place. And Yah actually sets up cities for people to go to escape vengeance. So this is essentially kind of the same thing. He's paying for his mistake so that no one can say, I'm going to go get him because of what he did. Then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech, his wife, and his female slaves, so they could bear children. For Adonai had completely locked up every womb in Abimelech's household because of Sarah, Abram's wife. He put a hold on that. He went, "Erp. We got to fix this." Any questions on chapter 20? All right. 21. Babe, you want to read?
Sure. Then Adonai visited Sarah, just as he had said, and Adonai did just for Sarah, as he had spoken. So Sarah became pregnant and gave birth to a son for Abraham in his old age, at the appointed time that God had told him. Abraham named his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore for him, Isaac.
So here, appointed time. It's the same thing. This is Moed. So this is happening on that feast again. That feast day that is coming back around, just as he had said.
Then Abraham circumcised Isaac on his 8-day-old son, just as God had commanded him. And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. So Sarah said, God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh with me. And she also said, who would have said to Abraham, Sarah has nursed children, for I have given birth to a son in his old age. And the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a big feast on the day Isaac was weaned. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, making fun. So she said to Abraham, drive out this female slave and her son, but the son of this female slave will not be an heir with my son, with Isaac. Now the matter was very displeasing in Abraham's eyes on the account of his son. But God said to Abraham, do not be displeased about the boy and your slave woman, for whatever Sarah says to you, listen to her voice, for through Isaac shall your seed be called.
So, maybe it's just me, but this sounds kind of harsh. What's going on? Now, one thing I want to point out, this word making fun, in some translations says mocking, and in some of the other ancient texts, there is the idea that, so one, we think about, there's a big age gap between
Like
Ishmael.
10 years,
Yeah. So the idea here is that Isaac is still really young. I mean, he's just been weaned. So depending on how you study that out, it could be anywhere from 2 to 5. But then you've got Ishmael, who's potentially 15 to 18, right? So there's a big gap. So you got this really older teenager who's making fun of or mocking the younger kid. But there's actually some texts that talk about this idea that Ishmael actually was threatening his life, basically saying, "You ain't nothing but a little squirrel. I take you out anytime I want to."
Yeah.
And Sarah seeing this, going, "Oh my gosh, this son of promise is going to die because this boy is now." Now, around the time of Abraham, there was actually a king in the land of Sumeria, also known as Shinar, that we talked about last week or the week before. This land of Shinar, which is kind of Babylonia, the Mesopotamia, the lower Mesopotamia area. But there was a king known as Lipit Ishtar. And he actually developed what's known as the Code of Lipit Ishtar. And it's a collection of laws and rules that were promulgated from his kingdom in this region. And if you think about it, this is the same time that Abraham has been journeying on, that this king is in power. And the Mesopotamian Empire had a very large influence in this area. So it would have had an effect on all the other regions in that area. So there's a good chance that Abraham would have known of these rules, these laws that have been passed around. And one of the rules that are in this historical, and I've seen pictures of, they've actually dug one up. It's very old because it dates back to like 1920 BC. But one of the rules in it is about the children of concubines and what they're supposed to do. And there's actually only 2 ways in this document to handle this situation. 1, give them their share of the inheritance. Or 2, release them and give them their freedom. So I'm saying maybe, just maybe, Yah was using the law of the land to further his purpose, right? And if you think about it, I mean, all through Scripture, there's parts that talk about, hey, if there's a king over you, be submissive to him. So as long as law doesn't go against Torah, there's no reason why we shouldn't be obedient to it if it's the law of the land. If we are under the rule of a kingdom and it doesn't go against Torah, then Yah says we should be obedient to it. So, interesting that then they're like, Sarah's like, get him out of here, and Yah's like, hey, listen to her. Because Abraham had the choice. Send her away with her freedom, with Ishmael, or give Ishmael part of the inheritance, which was never part of the plan. Which I think is interesting, that this whole mess came out of Abraham's problems. He didn't wait on Yah, so we're getting this whole mess. And had really, based on that law of the land, had he not sent her away with Ishmael, he would have had legal right to Isaac's inheritance.
Right, because he was the first.
He was the first.